Hello, sixth graders. Welcome to 5.5. Today we'll be discussing percents. And for our learning target, we have I can write percents as fractions, and then the opposite of that, writing a fraction as a percent. Okay. A lot of times we'll use percents to find our grades in class. And outside of class, percents are one of the most commonly used forms of math that you'll run into, I think. So definitely some good tips and tricks in this section to be able to work with percents. Okay. First, I would just want to talk about the meaning of the word percents, and the word cents actually means 100. So the word cent, that means 100. Okay, so when it says per cent, that means per 100. Okay, so when I say like century is, you'll see CENTURY. Well, a century is 100 years. Okay, again, there's that 100. Or if I say a cent and I'm talking about money, well, that's 1/100th of a dollar. All right, so the meaning of the word percent is kind of important when we're discussing how to find them. Let's look at our key idea and see if that can shed a little bit more light on what a percent is. It says writing percents as fractions. A percent is a part to whole ratio, where the whole is 100. So you can write a percent as a fraction with a denominator of 100. Right? For example, if you had 60%, you can write that as 60 out of a total of 100. Right? So that's how you'd write a percent as a fraction. Sometimes they're going to want you to simplify this. Make sure you read your directions to see if they want it in simplest form or not. Here it is for our first example. It says writing percents as fractions. Write 35% as a fraction in simplest form. So if you look at this diagram, there it is a 10 by 10 grid. And there are 10, 20, 35 of them that are highlighted. So that's where the 35% comes in. And our total here is out of, since it's a 10 by 10 grid, 10 times 10 is 100. So that would give us 35 out of 100. And then putting it in simplest form, well, 35 and 0 both end in 100. I can divide each, or both end in a 5 or 0. I can divide each by 5. 35 divided by 5 will give me 7. And 100 divided by 5 would give me 20. So 7/20ths would be that fraction in simplest form. Letter B says write 100 as a fraction in simplest form, 100%. All right, well, I just need to write my percent over my total. So anything divided by itself, 100 divided by 100 would give me 1. So 100% as a fraction is actually 1 whole. And 35% as a fraction was 35 over 100 simplified to 7/20ths. Now we have an example where we have a percent that's greater than 100. We have 174%. And they want us to write that as a mixed number. Well, here we have 1 whole. So we figured out in the previous example that's 1. And then here I have a fraction or a portion of this 100 10 by 10 grid highlighted. And there are 74 out of 100 that are in orange there. And now I just need to simplify that. Okay, so the other way you maybe were looking at that as well, how many are colored orange. Well, there's 174 orange over a total of 100. But remember, when you convert this improper fraction to a mixed number, it would just be this. Okay. Now we can continue simplifying. 74 and 100. Maybe you might say, well, I don't know how I simplify that. Well, they both end in even numbers, so you could divide each by 2. So that would give us 1, and 74 divided by 2 would give us a total of 37. And 100 divided by 2 give us a total of 50. And are there any more common factors between 37 and 50? Nope, there are not. So 1 and 37/50ths will be our final answer for letter C. All right, so that's kind of when you look at a diagram and put your percent into a fraction, right? For the on your own problems, they're just going to give you the percent as a number, not using the grid model. And what they're going to want you to do is, again, write it as a fraction or a mixed number in simplest form. Why don't you go ahead and pause the video and try 1 through 4, please. Okay, for number 1, our percent is 5%. So that would be the same thing as 5 over 100. And then simplify. Well, it ends in a 5 or a 0, so I can divide by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1, and 100 divided by 5 would be 20. So 1/20th would be the fraction in simplest form. Number 2, I have 168%, so that would be the same as 168 over 100. And then go ahead and simplify. Well, I'll change it into a mixed number. So 100 goes into 168 one time, and there are 68 hundredths left. Then I could divide by what is a common factor between 68 and 100. Well, they're both even, so you could divide by 2. So if you did that, it would give us 1 and 34, 34/50ths. And 34 and 50 are even, so we could divide them both again by 2. So 34 divided by 2 would give you 17, and 50 divided by 2 would give you 25. So 1 and 17/25ths for number 2. Number 3, 36% is 36 over 100. And then simplify. What's our common factor? Greatest common factor would be 4. Divide each by 4 would give you 9/25ths. Remember, you can always divide 100 by 4 because think about quarters. If you had $1 and you divided that by 4 quarters, it would give you 25 cents per quarter. And lastly, 83% is 83 over 100. And are there any common factors between 83 and 100 that you could simplify this any further? And the answer is no. So 83 hundredths would be your final answer. All right, now we're going to move on to doing the opposite, where now we're going to write fractions as percents. Okay, it says write an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100. Then write the numerator with the percent symbol. So one of the ways that we can write a fraction as a percent is we can try to get our denominator to 100. So their example is 1/4. Said, well, you can go from 4 to 100 by multiplying by 25. If you do multiply by 25 in your denominator, you also have to do it in your numerator. So 1 times 25 would be 25, which would give you 25 over 100. 25 over 100 is the same as 25%. All right. I see that I'm running out of time here, so I will get back to you with example 2 in just a minute. In example 2, it says write 3/50ths as a percent. Again, the trick is to be able to get your denominator to 100, because then your top number is your percent out of 100. So 50 times 2 would give you 100. So multiply your numerator by 2 as well. And 3 times 2 would be 6. And 6 out of 100 would give us 6% for example 2. Moving on to the real life application, it says a drought affects 9 out of the 12 Midwestern states. What percent of the Midwestern states are affected by the drought? Okay, well, here it shows our Midwestern states, and it says 9 out of the 12 of them. All right, I'll write that as a fraction. And then it wants to know what percent of these are affected by a drought. Well, you might be thinking to yourself, well, how in the heck can I go from 12 to 100 by multiplying by a number? Well, you can't multiply by a whole number to get from 12 to 100. You have to multiply by a decimal. So the other thing that I'll give you a hint of you can do is first you can simplify and then you can get your number to 100. So if I were to simplify this fraction, for example, if I were to get it into fourths, to go from 12 to 4, I could divide by 3. Dividing by 3 on top, that would give me 3. So 9/12 and 3/4 are equivalent fractions. And now I can easily go from 4 to 100 by multiplying by, you got it, 25. So also multiply by 25 on top. 3 times 25 would give you 75. And 75 out of 100 is 75%. The other mental math trick that you can think of here is, well, if you have 3 out of 4 quarters, how many cents do you have? Well, 3 quarters is worth 75 cents. And look at here, 75%. That's definitely not a coincidence. Finishing up with the on your owns, please pause the video now to try 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Okay, number 5. You just need to multiply by 2 to get to 100. So 31 times 2 would be 62, which would give you 62% for number 5. Number 6, multiply by 4. So to get to 100, so multiply by 4 on top will give you 28 over 100, which is 28%. Next one, to get from 20 to 100, you need to multiply by 5. So 19 times 5 would give you 95%. And in the last one, we've got 1 whole and a half. So whenever you see that whole, you know that this needs to be greater than 100%. So 1, remember, is 100%, and then we have to add on to it a half. Well, if you got 1 out of 2, that's 50%. So your total would be 150%. Okay. So if you didn't know that 1 out of 2 is 50%, well, how do you go from 2 to 100? Multiply by 50. So multiply by 50 on top. 1 times 50 is 50. 50 out of 100 is 50%. And lastly, it says it rains in all the Midwestern states. What percent of the states are affected by drought? What percent of the states affected by drought does it rain? Okay, well, if it rains in all of them, that would be 100%. Okay, that all is always, the total would be 100%. Okay, that concludes it for this section of notes. I will give you a quick reminder that in your self-paced form, that there is a link to a Math Antics, and I'm going to definitely encourage you to check out that Math Antics link, because there are some great tips and tricks and pointers that he gives in that video. So definitely going to highly encourage you to check that out. All right. Hopefully you learned a little bit about percents today. Let me know if you have more questions. I wanted to leave you with this one more idea of what if you can't get your denominator to 100 very easily by simplifying first. So what if you had something random like on a homework assignment, there was 13 problems and you got 8 right and you wanted to figure out your percent. You're like, Mr. Gels, I can't simplify this. I don't know how to get my denominator to 100. The other way that I'll teach you in the future that you can get a percent is you can take your numerator and you can divide it by your denominator. So I'll just take 8 divided by 13. All right, plug that in your calculator. I know some of you have done this to figure out your grade. If you do that, 8 divided by 13 in your calculator, you come up with 0.6153, blah, 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 blah. It keeps going, right? To convert a decimal to a percent, you just need to move your decimal 2 spots. So that would give you about 61.5% would be your grade or your percentage on that homework assignment. Okay, so that's the other way to convert a fraction to a decimal, is just by dividing your part by your whole. And again, in the future, that's coming a little bit more, but just a little heads up there. Okay, hopefully you're a little bit more comfortable with percents. Good luck on the practice and the homework, and I will see you next time.